You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 171. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. What role does business development play in your practice? Maybe you're one of those lawyers who has it dialed in. You've got a plan, you execute on your plan, and building a market for your services is a regular part of your routine. It's something you enjoy, it's something you do. Or maybe you find yourself on the other end of the spectrum. You might think of business development and you just don't want to have anything to do with it. You don't understand it. You don't see the benefit, and so you avoid it. Or maybe you find yourself somewhere in the middle. Regardless, I am thrilled that you've joined me for today's podcast episode. Welcome and thank you for being here. I am excited to talk to you about business development and excited to dive into 3 common mistakes that I see lawyers make when it comes to business development. Now, the reason that I'm particularly excited to speak with you about business development currently is that I was recently invited to speak at a law firm to a group of young lawyers about business development, and I just delivered that presentation yesterday. It was so fun and so lovely to be in a room with lawyers to talk about business development, to see what kind of questions you have about it, to offer strategies and tools and practical tips to help you with business development. And as I was preparing, it really got me to thinking about the role of business development in a legal practice. And it also got me to thinking about what it was like when I was in practice. And I really wish that when I was a junior lawyer, somebody had sat down with me and explained the role of business development, why it was important, ways to approach it and use it to build your practice. So I'm thrilled that you're here today. I'm thrilled that we have a chance to talk about business development. And I'm delighted to see that you are making this a priority in your practice. Now, before I dive into the mistakes, I wanted to lay a little bit of foundation. First of all, I'd like to talk about the role of business development in a legal practice. Now, the first thing I'd invite you to think about is your legal practice as having 3 pillars. Now, regardless of where you work, you will have these pillars. They are perhaps more pronounced if you work in a law firm or other private practice environment. So the first pillar I would offer is the skills pillar. The skills pillar is you developing your substantive legal skills. This is the work that your clients pay you for as a lawyer. And this is one of the first things that you're going to be exposed to as a lawyer. When you're in law school, you learn the law. When you join a law firm or other organization, you start to apply your legal knowledge to real world situations. So that's the first pillar of your practice. And that, of course, is ongoing. The second pillar of your practice is practice management. So what does that look like? As your volume of work starts to increase, you need to manage that work. You need to organize it. You need to deliver products on time. You need to meet deadlines. You need to meet filing applications. You need to keep track of your time. There are a number of practices that you're going to develop simply to keep your practice organized and flowing properly. As your practice develops and you start to build up a team of others who may report to you, who support you, you're also going to be developing your leadership skills. And these I would consider as falling into the practice management bucket as well. So in your practice so far, we've got pillar 1, your substantive work, your legal skills, bucket 2, your practice management and leadership skills, and then there's bucket 3. And bucket 3 is creating a market for your work. Now, anytime you are employed or retained, you are serving a market, right? You have a market for your work, somebody who's willing to pay you for your services. And when it comes to marketing, sometimes I think we can consider marketing to be something that is external to us, right? That's somebody else's job. What I'd invite you to consider is that regardless of your role in an organization, you are marketing. You are generating a market for your work product. If you're a junior lawyer at a law firm, chances are you have internal clients who are relying on you to do their work. They are choosing you to do their work. That is your market. You may have external clients who are directly retaining you to do their legal work. So if you're a more senior lawyer, if you're a lawyer with an independent practice, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that external client. That is the market that you have for your work. You may have a combination of internal clients at the firm where you work and external clients. If you are a in-house counsel, then you have a market for your work. And that market is your client, right? The different departments within the organization that you work for. So regardless, if you are actively engaged in work where people are paying you for that work, you have a market. And what I'm inviting you to consider as part of your legal practice is that this is a third pillar that you want to cultivate. Now, what I've seen happening, and I'll get to this more in a minute, is that the skills you will develop no matter what, right? For you to be retained or employed as a lawyer, you're going to be doing that legal work. You're going to develop your skills. You're going to need to. As the volume of work grows, you will need to develop your practice management skills in order to get that work done effectively. That third bucket, that market for your work, is one that is a little bit more tricky because if you have a sufficient volume of work to keep yourself busy, you may not be actively marketing, you may not be actively generating a market for your business. And so business development, marketing, because sometimes it doesn't feel necessary, is one of those areas that lawyers can sometimes neglect. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So that was the first concept that I wanted to introduce for today's podcast episode, which is to think about your practice as having three pillars: your substantive legal work, your practice management, and generating a market for your work. For that third pillar, that's where we start to consider business development. Now, the term business development gets thrown around quite a bit. It has many definitions depending on which one you choose to look at. And I'm going to offer a definition for business development for the purpose of today's podcast episode, which is engaging in strategic activities with a view to generating work. So that's my definition of business development for today. And to me, business development is comprised of three different factors. The first factor is relationships. It's strategically cultivating relationships with individuals who will support you in your career and potentially become clients or who are already clients. The second aspect is your authority. In order to generate work, you need to demonstrate that you can do the work, that you have a certain level of authority, a skill set that you can use to help other people. And so part of your business development is showing others, including those people with whom you form relationships, that you have authority, you have capacity, you have the skills to do the work. You're building trust with those people. You're showing them that you can help them in a particular subject area. The third aspect of business development is the ability to attract work through service. Now, this to me is one of the key ingredients of business development. I think it's where people get a little bit tripped up when they think about marketing. I think sometimes we think about marketing as this thing where we need to go and tell everybody how great we are, when in fact, the most effective marketing is where you simply show up in service, where you find out what other people need, and then you find ways to help them. You help them by teaching them something that will help them solve a problem or avoid a problem. There's many ways that you can do this. And so that is the third aspect of business development. So to summarize, business development for today's discussion is that ability to build relationships, establish authority, and attract work through service. So what are the top three mistakes that I see lawyers make when it comes to business development in their practice? Well, the first mistake I've already alluded to, which is the mistake of not spending time, not focusing on business development. They don't do it until it becomes urgent. So, what does that look like in my coaching practice? Well, there are lawyers who will come to me to proactively engage in business development. They are starting out and from a fairly early stage being intentional about the relationships that they're building and the opportunities that they're creating or finding to get in front of people, to be an authority, to develop their skills, and to show up in service of others. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the lawyers who are waiting for it to become urgent. Typically, cases where I see the business development need has become urgent is where lawyers are now in a position of transitioning jobs. So it may be that they are no longer happy at their firm. It may be that their internal market has dried up and they need to find a new place to practice. And what effectively has happened is they no longer have a current market where they are, and they need to establish a new market. They need to find a new job, a new firm, a new role. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to rely on your network. And so if you have not been building your network, you haven't been building relationships, you haven't been establishing yourself as an authority, it's that much more difficult to get started when you move into your job search, because you're now reaching out to people for the first time with the thought in mind that you want them to help you find a job. You're hoping that they have a position that you can apply for. And that can have the effect of making it feel a little bit needy, a little bit graspy. And so you may feel more reluctant to be building your network, building your relationships when you're coming from the position of looking for a job. Another example where the business development component can become urgent is when you're a lawyer. I see this often with associates at law firms who are climbing the ranks and they're developing more seniority. They're getting close to partnership. They may be on the cusp of applying. And what they have found, or what they've been told, is that they need to have more of an established set of relationships, a more established network. Maybe they're being asked to bring in business. Maybe they're being asked to show that they've got the potential to bring in business. And maybe they're lacking in terms of a market, internal and external, for their work. And so here they start to feel the pressure. And so they want to jump 2 feet in to a process of business development. And it's not necessarily that they've waited too long or that they can't build their business, they can't build their relationships, they can't establish their authority, they can't show up in service at that point. However, it may be that they've missed out on opportunities to build it up slowly over time. They've missed out on opportunities for that compound effect, the benefits that accrue when you do things slowly but surely over time and your network starts to build and then it builds on itself, right? People refer you, opportunities come to you, and you may miss out on opportunities to do that if you push business development until you reach a certain stage in your practice. So it's understandable if you find yourself in this position. Please don't beat yourself up over it. There's a lot of reasons why this happens. Number one, it may not be clear that it is that important. You may have lawyers who have given you the advice that you just need to put your head down and do good work and the rest will take care of itself. And there's some truth to that. Absolutely. If you're doing great work, you are going to find that your clients are happy. They're going to come back to you. They're going to want you to do more great work. You may be really busy. And again, if you're busy with your practice and you're busy managing your practice, you might find that getting to that third pillar of business development just doesn't feel urgent enough. And if you've listened to the podcast before, we've talked about the matrix, the Eisenhower matrix, where tasks are assigned importance based on, or priority, I should say, based on importance and urgency. So something like business development may be really important, but it's not urgent. And so it's easy to push it off. It may be that you don't feel like you're ready for it. A lot of lawyers, especially junior lawyers, might feel like they're not quite ready to present themselves as an authority, to speak at an event, to write an article. It may be that you don't feel comfortable going out into a networking event and introducing yourself to people and forging those relationships. So that can hold you back. And another reason that I see among lawyers is that they think about business development and the idea in their mind is speaking at a conference or going to large networking events or going on social media. And none of these things appeals to them. And so when they see their options as being options that don't particularly resonate with them, then they avoid them. So if you find yourself in this category, if you find that business development is one of those things that you know you should do, know that you want to do, but you've been pushing it off and not doing it, I have some ideas about how you can avoid this particular and very common mistake, which is number one, to have a mindset shift and think about business development as being one of the pillars of your practice, one of the three pillars, one that is designated time and energy. So you may have heard of the 80-20 rule, the idea that you can spend 80% of your time in your practice and 20% of your time on your practice. So in your practice is executing the substantive legal work. 20% is planning, it's business development, it's professional development. So let's create a category of time that is specifically allocated to this. Another suggestion is to start small and build your way up. So if in your mind, establishing authority means that you need to show up at an industry conference as the keynote speaker, that's a pretty big stretch if what you've been doing so far is not very much. And so you want to give yourself some baby steps. You might start by speaking up at meetings within your organization, at your firm. Maybe you have lunch seminars that are specific to practice areas and you want to start delivering case updates or talk about something interesting that happened on one of your files. From there, you might go to leading group meetings. You might go to establishing or setting up different lunch and learns within your firm. From there, you might start to branch out and speak at events for the Bar Association, or you might start to speak at your client's premises, go to their site and educate them on a topic that is relevant to them. From there, you might move beyond into industry conferences, etc. So you want to think about what type of authority building, relationship building activities resonate with you, and to then find ways for you to do what feels comfortable-ish now. I would always encourage you to push yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but you can build your way there. Start small and build your way up into activities that are going to help you build your relationships and establish authority. And then finally, I'd encourage you to focus on activities and people that you genuinely like. It is so much easier to stick to something if you actually enjoy doing it. So in summary, top mistake number one is putting off business development until it's urgent. And I've offered you some strategies to help you prioritize business development before it gets to that point. Common mistake number two, neglecting to develop the clients that you already have. So when you think about business development, if you're like many lawyers that I work with, you might jump immediately to thinking about client acquisition. Who are the clients out there that we don't yet have? And how do we find them? And how do we bring them from being people that are in our orbit to people who then start to work with us? That's wonderful. I want you to be thinking that way about potential clients that you have not yet already served. But when it comes to business development, the first thing I would invite you to think about is who are your existing clients and how can you serve them better? One of the things you might keep in mind is that it's often easier to cultivate a deeper relationship and to generate more work opportunities with clients that you already have, clients with whom you've already established a relationship of trust, than it is to go and find brand new clients. So if you're in a law firm environment, what that means is that I would encourage you to think about the lawyers that you're already working with and ask yourself what opportunities there might be to work more with those lawyers. I'd invite you to focus in particular on the lawyers that you enjoy working with, the types of files that you most enjoy working on, and to channel your energies there. Now, within your firm, there may be multiple departments and there may be potential referral sources within your firm. There may be lawyers in another group that are going to refer work to lawyers in your group. You may want to cultivate relationships with them. To do that, you might want to build your authority internally the same way that you would build your authority externally. So let's say you're a tax lawyer and there's certain tax issues that always come up on deals. You might decide to do a presentation to the deal lawyers in your firm where you explain to them in their language where in the transaction tax issues might arise and how they can avoid problems, how they can solve problems, and when to bring you in to help them, right? So you're educating them, right? You're providing a service, you're helping them understand how they can do their job better. And you're also showing the authority that you have, the expertise that you have to help them. And you're planting that seed with them that if they have that problem, they can turn to you. So that is just one example of building out your network internally. It also helps to build your profile within your organization. Now, if your firm has offices outside of your city, wherever it is that you live, you might also think about what types of opportunities there are within your firm to, again, market yourself internally to other offices to help them with the work that they do. They might need support from lawyers in your office, in your practice area. And so you can reach out to those lawyers. Again, establish relationships with them. You might offer to do some sort of lunch and learn for them. You may simply have a one-to-one conversation with lawyers to learn more about their practice and to let them know how you're able to support them in their practice. So coming back to this mistake number 2 then, the problem that I see is that lawyers immediately leap to trying to generate work from clients that are potential clients. And what I'd invite you to do is to think about the clients that you already work with, clients where there's perhaps an easier way of finding them, right? So lawyers who are internal to your organization. And I've been speaking about the internal clients. There may also be external clients that you already have a relationship with, who you're already working for, where there may be additional opportunities for you to help them further. So I'd invite you to think about what those might be and how you can better serve the clients that you already have. So if you wanted to have a takeaway list of things to do, number 1, I would invite you to take an inventory of your existing clients, internal, external, potential clients as well that you've already identified. I would encourage you to identify opportunities that you can use to develop closer relationships and offer support. I would encourage you to focus on developing those relationships. And when you're satisfied that those relationships have reached a level where you've done enough, right? You've done enough to feel like you're fulfilling those relationships. They know that you're interested in helping them further. They know how you can help them further. That's when I would invite you to then focus your energies more outward. And you can do both at the same time. But again, we really don't want to neglect the clients that you already have. And then finally, number 3, the third common mistake that I see lawyers make when it comes to business development is giving up too soon. Now, this is completely understandable. Business development truly is the long game. I can remember as a student going door to door with my pad of paper and pen in hand, asking for work. And since then, I've seen many other lawyers. I've worked with many other lawyers at all levels of seniority who have had that feeling of not being very busy, looking for work, asking lawyers that they work with, maybe following up with their external clients, trying to find something to do, and the work is not forthcoming. It may be that there's other examples. Maybe you've been speaking, you've been delivering presentations, you've been highly engaged in your local bar, and no work is flowing from the activities that you've been engaged in. It may be that you've been pitching for particular mandates with specific clients and you keep pitching, and so far you have not been selected as counsel to be on the project. And it can feel really discouraging, right? It's like going to an audition and you're not getting the part, and it can feel really frustrating. And yet every time you do something like that, you are building your skill set. You are getting known. You are getting closer to the work flowing in your direction. And so what I would invite you to consider here, if you feel like you're doing everything that you possibly can and it's still not coming to fruition, number 1, you might check on the activities that you're doing, right? There's something to be said about evaluating whether the activities are strategic, right? Are you developing relationships with the right people? Are you establishing yourself as an authority that could potentially help them? Are you showing up in service? Are you showing up in a way that is showing others how you can help them? Are you helping them solve problems? Are you helping them avoid problems? So evaluate what it is that you're doing. And if you're satisfied that what you're doing is the right thing to do, then I would invite you to continue with the patience that is required for playing the long game, right? When we play the long game, sometimes it takes time. So we need to have that patience and also the faith that what you're doing is going to come to fruition. An example or an analogy that might help here is when you plant a garden, right? You go out, you plant the seeds, and you really can't see what is happening, right? It seems like nothing is happening until one day you see the little sprouts come out from the earth. And next thing you know, you've got this beautiful garden. So your business development efforts are much like that. You might be putting in a lot of effort now and you don't see the results, but I encourage you to keep going. Now, what might stand in the way? Well, again, going back to this idea of urgency and importance, if you've got business development on your to-do list and you've also got other items like answer emails, put out fire, meet with associate or colleague to discuss a file, whatever it happens to be, something that is short-term and has an immediate reward, chances are you're going to be tempted to do that thing that has the immediate payoff. So again, I encourage you to think about the long game, right? Activities that you can invest in slowly over time that eventually are going to pay off. Another thing that may hold you back is this idea that it feels too big, right? That again, kind of going back to the idea in an earlier example, that it just feels like it's too much, right? That you're never going to get to that place where you want to be. You're never going to have that big book of business. You're never going to be able to speak at that conference. And so again, what I'd invite you to think about is those small steps, how each of these baby steps that you're taking now, that internal CLE presentation that you deliver, that sets you up for the presentation that you deliver to an external client, which sets you up for speaking at a conference. Every time that you take a step, you're able to build on that existing step. And what you'll find over time is that your network starts to grow, your skills start to grow, your confidence starts to grow. And what can then happen is that these windfall opportunities fall into your lap. And it seems like it's out of nowhere, but it's because you've been doing all the work to get to that point. By windfall opportunity, what I mean is those golden opportunities that have the effect of accelerating you in your career, that put you in contact with people that you really want to be in contact with. And it is something that results from the small, steady, consistent effort that you make over time. So to recap, 3 of the common mistakes that I see lawyers make are: number 1, not engaging in business development; number 2, not focusing internally before they focus externally; and finally, number 3 is giving up too soon. And I've offered a number of strategies that you can use to avoid those problems. Now, in order to implement those strategies that I mentioned, that idea of committing to business development as a practice, the idea of starting small, building your way up, that idea of reaching out to others. One of the things that I meant to mention in the section about giving up too soon is the idea of giving yourself support, right? Finding a mentor, somebody internally who can help you, whether it's a colleague or a mentor or a sponsor. I would use those people. I would ask them for advice about how it is that you can go about business development. If there's somebody in your firm or organization or somebody who you know professionally or socially who has a robust book of business and you want to know their secret, go ahead and ask them. I'm sure they're going to be willing to share that information with you. You can also work with a coach. You can bring in somebody like me who can help you focus, who can help you choose the activities, who can help you create accountability and sustainability and prioritize business development in your practice. So there's a number of things you can do in order to prioritize and be selective and stay focused on your business development activities. I mentioned there were a few skills that are required. Number 1 is awareness. So it's simply gaining awareness of the role that business development plays in your practice. So if you are in private practice at a law firm, business development, creating a market for your work is an important element of your practice. As an articling student, you're developing an internal market, lawyers who are going to send you work and who are going to want to have you within their department. as you mature in your practice. Your market is going to be the lawyers who send you work, whether they're in your office or another office. It's going to be your external clients who want you on the file. So at all stages, you're going to have this market for your work. Now, if you're not a lawyer at a law firm, you're still going to have a market for your work. If you're in-house, your client and the departments that rely on you for help with their legal advice, those are all your clients. If you work for government or another institution, your client is your employer. And so I would invite you to always be thinking about who your market is, regardless of the container that you work in. So once you have that awareness, you're going to need to commit. If you decide that business development is something that you want to be proactively engaging in throughout your practice, you need to make that commitment and decide what that is going to look like for you, what kind of activities you're going to engage in, what type of relationships you're going to form, how you're going to show up in service to attract the kind of work that you want. Finally, you'll need courage. None of this is easy. If you get up to speak in front of a room full of people, it can be really intimidating, especially if you consider yourself to be an introvert, especially if you feel like you don't have enough experience to be there. It can be really hard. And so it will take courage for you to do the things that you have on your list that will help you develop business. What will happen as a result when you commit, when you have a committed practice of growing your practice, of business development, of building relationships, of establishing your authority, is that over time, you will generate career opportunities. It doesn't necessarily mean career opportunities in the sense of switching from job A to job B, although that can happen, but even opportunities within the role that you have. The more that lawyers know about you, the more they might be referring work to you, asking to have you on their files. The more that external clients work with you and they're happy, they're satisfied, they've had a great experience, and now they're referring their counterparts, their colleagues. Over time, what you'll find is the more you actively and proactively engage in this business development, the more opportunities will come your way. You'll find that your reputation starts to grow. The people will start to know of you. And so when people talk about you, they'll be like, yeah, I know her. She's a great lawyer. I highly recommend her. And what this will translate to is more control over your practice. If you are able to control the flow of work that comes to you, you will have more control. You can control the type of work that comes to you. You can build a team where you're the central hub. The work is coming through you. You are now delegating to your team. And so you have more control. You may see that this network, this business development translates into greater compensation. And you will also very likely feel that you're making a much more significant contribution when you are showing up in service in the community and for your clients. What you will find is that feeling of fulfillment, that you are helping people. One of the most common responses I get when I ask lawyers why they went to law school, it is, I want to help people. So by engaging in business development, by finding people who need your help, who want your expertise, who want your service, and then you're able to deliver that, you are able to help more people. So, my dear friend, thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you about business development. If you would like help to engage in business development in your practice, whether it's forming a strategy, thinking about who you want to have in your network, ways that you can reach them, ways that you can show up in service, or if you have lawyers in your organization who you would like to support with their business development, whether they're junior lawyers who are learning the ropes and who would benefit from incorporating business development into their practice at an early stage, or if you are someone who would like to organize an event for your lawyers, a speaking engagement, for example, where we can get in a room together and everybody talk about business development and how to approach it and how best to use it as a tool for growing your practice. If you're a senior associate and you're transitioning to partner and you want to develop your book of business, you want to be proactive in increasing your profile within your organization. If any of these things is something that you would like to work on, I would invite you to reach out to me and I can help you with that. So with that, my friends, I wish you a beautiful week. Thank you again for joining me. It has been a pleasure and I look forward to reconnecting again with you soon. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, Subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.